Basil. No summer garden is complete without it. A deceptively easy plant to grow, our basil plants often look beautiful in spring and into midsummer. Until disaster strikes. Late summer heat and diseases often send our once beautiful and perfect basil plants into a tailspin, crashing into the ground. Basil is, for all intents and purposes, pretty easy to grow. The seeds are cheap, they germinate quickly. It makes for a great companion planting in your garden, suitable to fill pretty much any crack or crevice with a new plant. It tolerates full sun, it tolerates shady conditions. Basically, from last frost all the way to the middle of the summer, basil is pretty effortless to grow in your garden. But then something happens. I was sick and tired of losing my entire basil crop to heat and disease in late summer, so I decided to do something about it. I tested the newest advancements in basil growing technology that claim to fix everything. This new basil variety has changed the way I will grow basil forever, because now I have so much basil, I don't even know what to do with it all.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out my Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom apparel and gear.
The late summer heat and humidity caused two big problems: bolting and downy mildew disease. One of these problems can be managed, but the other is a death knell for your basil plants and spreads like wildfire throughout your garden. Bolting is the process by which a plant prematurely enters the flowering and seed production stage. While many annual crops eventually flower and go to seed, bolting implies that it happens too early, caused by environmental stressors, most often heat. The fact is that most crops that we grow in our annual vegetable garden, well, they struggle to endure prolonged temperatures above 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit because, well, they are natural understory crops. They simply did not adapt to tolerate full summer sun being blasted 8 to 10 hours a day every single day. So those heat units, they build up over time, and the crops prematurely bolt on us out of stress. That is precisely why I put shade cloth above my garden from mid-June to early September. Take this basil plant right here. This is actually a volunteer basil plant that grew from leftover seed on its own shortly after my last chance of frost. So this has been sitting here getting blasted by 9, 10, 11 hours of full unprotected sun every single day all throughout the spring and the summer. And as a result, all of that heat, well, it's begun to accumulate, and the plant is reacting by bolting because of all of the built-up heat stress. And keep in mind, this is no ordinary basil plant right here. This is actually holy basil. It is not the normal Genovese basil that you are used to. Holy basil is much more tropical, and it's more resistant to diseases and heat. And even though it has those additional resistances, it is still bolting on me. All of that heat stress over the summer, well, it's added up, and this basil, it's looking to go to seed. But that being said, bolting on heat-tolerant crops like this can be managed to a degree. Oh, and don't worry about the white stuff on the plant. That is just Surround WP crop protectant that helps keep the plant cooler, and it'll also keep the worms off the plant this time of year. So all we need to do is take some pruning snips and start cutting off those flower heads. And when you remove these flower heads, what that does is it delays the process of going to seed. Once you allow your plant to fully go to seed, it will reproduce and it will fulfill its obligation in life, so it will start dying back on you. If you can prevent that seed, that mature seed from forming, well, then the plant is going to have to keep the life processes going. So you can extend your harvest for weeks or even months by pruning off those seed tops as they form. And keep in mind, managing bolting like this on your crops is all relative. If you were to try and grow something like broccoli in a Florida summer, you could never manage the bolting by pruning like this. It's going to bolt and go to seed on you because broccoli bolts when it hits 70 degrees. So when you're dealing with every day in the 90s for months, there's really nothing you can do in that situation. But with a heat-tolerant variety like holy basil that can take the heat, you can drag out the process for a long period of time because they are susceptible to bolting but inherently resistant. So you still have to have reasonable temperatures that the crops can tolerate when you use this pruning method. So, like clockwork, every August I would have to go around to all of the different basil plants in my yard almost every single day and check them for bolting. And if I see those flower and seed tops begin, I'd have to lop them off in order to keep them alive and productive. Not an awful thing, not a tremendous amount of work, but it is annoying because it is just another thing I would have to do in the miserable late summer heat. But the big problem, my true basil growing nightmare, would be from the disease Downy mildew. Every late summer, downy mildew outbreaks would begin to present themselves in my basil plants. It would start to present itself with sporadic leaf chlorosis, which is the yellowing of the leaf tissue. Then it would evolve to brown lesions and irregular browning patterns on the leaves themselves. It would work its way up the plant, quickly infecting the entire plant, leading to defoliation and eventually death. My basil garden would go from perfection to near total wipeout over the course of a single month, usually from mid-August to mid-September. While downy mildew can be treated to a degree with natural fungicides like copper, once it begins, it's really hard to stop in very warm and humid climates like where I live here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. It tends to spread like wildfire. Once you see it in one plant, it usually presents itself on almost all the plants in a matter of a week. A preventative spraying routine with fungicides would be more effective than waiting for it to appear and then start spraying, but I don't like constantly soaking the leaves of plants in fungicides, particularly plants where I actually eat the foliage of the plants themselves. So the way I've managed this is to constantly plant basil plants out into my garden. That way I will always have basil plants scattered all over the place in all different levels of maturity. The strategy is, if I plant so many basil plants so often in so many different conditions, full sun, part sun, full shade, scattered in all different beds around my yard, something will survive long enough that I'll have some harvestable basil around my yard until frost. And that is why I have young transplants that are ready to go into my garden now. The best way I've found to grow basil is to never stop growing basil. But last year, I learned of a new development in basil growing technology. There was a new line of basil varieties out there called Prospera, like Prosper or Prosperous. The breeder of these Prospera varieties marketed them as being the first varieties of basil with high genetic resistance to downy mildew, plus an intermediate resistance to fusarium. And the best part, they come in all different forms. Prospera, they offered the classic Genovese basil, plus a compact dwarfing Genovese plant, and Italian large-leaf variety, a red basil, and a Thai basil, all with that built-in high resistance to downy mildew, plus the intermediate resistance to fusarium. So I love trying new things and putting them to the test, so I ordered a bunch of seeds last year. I'll place links down in the video description to where I ordered these seeds for your convenience. I specifically tried two varieties of this Prospera basil, the Prospera Italian large-leaf and the Prospera red. Aside from that, I did everything exactly the same as I always do with my basil plants. I planted numerous waves of them out into my garden, just as I always do, assuming that I will lose a bunch of my crop to bolting and diseases in late summer. These seeds were quite expensive for basil seed, but now I understand why. I have a big problem. I have way too much basil because not only is nothing getting disease like it's supposed to this time of year, but nothing is bolting. This is a crazy sight for me to behold, and I have to take you around my yard to show you. In this raised garden bed right here are the first basil plants I planted out into my yard immediately after my last chance of frost in full sun. These have not had any shade protection at all, and all of these plants are pristine. This is the Italian large-leaf variety. You can see how big and beautiful the leaves are, and what's crazy about them is there is really no evidence of bolting. These have had no protection from the sun at all, and they are all basically perfect. I have been picking off of most of them fairly regularly, but because I have so many individual plants growing throughout my yard, it's not like I'm eating off of them every single day. And I'm just blown away that nothing is bolting. Here is the purple variety, well rather the red variety. This is Prospera Red. It does look like I'm getting a little tiny seed top forming in there, but by now, usually I've been trying to prevent these plants from bolting for over a month. So being midway through September, this is very unorthodox. Then in this raised garden bed right next to it, I have another Prospera Italian large leaf, and it was stunted because it was growing in full shade, but then I had a zucchini plant that was shading it out die, and since the zucchini plant is no longer there blocking it and it's growing in full sun, this plant is absolutely perfect. So it's really blowing my mind how absolutely wonderfully all of these plants are growing. At the same time I planted those basil plants, I planted this one in this raised garden bed. Now, way back when, in the beginning of April, I had all of my zucchini and cucumbers and watermelons planted in here, and this little tiny basil plant right here, well, it was kind of being shaded out by all of the plants. But all of the cucumbers and zucchini plants died a long time ago, so now the plant has the space to stretch its legs. Now what's interesting about this plant is, unlike the others, I have shade cloth installed above my garden. I put that shade cloth up in June. So this has been growing underneath the shade cloth, and it basically looks exactly the same. So it doesn't mind the dappled light situation. The leaves, I will say, are not quite as large as the plants that are growing out in full sun, but there is absolutely no sign at all of this plant bolting, which we would assume because it's getting some sun protection. Then in this fall garden bed that I planted about 4 weeks ago, where I have my peas and my string beans and radishes and carrots and other things growing, I put in 2 additional basil transplants. And the plant on the right is the Italian large leaf, and the plant on the left is the purple basil, well, the red basil, rather. But this is interesting. It looks like a genetic anomaly where some of the leaves are purple, but the other ones are kind of spotted. It looks really beautiful. And this, again, is growing underneath the shade cloth, so this has the protection of the shade. But considering that these have only been in here in this bed for a couple of weeks and they're still growing really well under the dappled light situation, well, I am very impressed with how well they're growing. And there are even more basil plants that are growing in this new garden bed that I just planted out about 3 weeks ago. We have another one of those Prospera red basils, which again, it's growing kind of strangely as a genetic anomaly. It only has a little bit of the red leaves, and most of it is green with kind of like a splatter pattern on the leaves. And then on the other side of this raised garden bed is a brand new Italian large leaf plant. This has only been planted for 3 or 4 weeks. I think 3 weeks, and it is an absolute monster. It absolutely loves growing underneath this insect netting, which provides 25 to 30% shade. And as I said earlier in the video, I have another Prospera Italian large leaf and another Prospera red transplant that have been ready to go out in my garden for a few weeks. They're actually majorly root bound, but I haven't been able to plant them yet because I don't really have anywhere to put them. I've never been in a situation before where every single basil plant that I've ever planted way back from the very beginning of April is still alive and beautiful in my garden in the middle of September. By now, a good portion of my crop should have been killed off by downy mildew or some other fungal disease, as well as there should be a lot of plant stress out there due to bolting, where plants will have either failed on me by now or they're in diminished capacity and not growing very well because they've bolted and gone into decline. Instead, every single thing that I've ever planted, it's pristine. It's growing, no signs of bolting, no signs of disease, virtually no pest damage at all. I'm just blown away. And the only thing that I've done differently is I went with these Prospera varieties. Now, I realize this video may not be relevant to every single person watching it. Some of you may have summers that are very mild and you don't normally deal with basil bolting. Some of you may have summers that are brief enough that these diseases and issues like bolting of a warm weather crop like basil is never an issue. Or maybe you live out west and your dew points are so low that you rarely have to deal with fungal diseases. But for those of us in hot, humid climates that have fairly long summers, these are things that we struggle with constantly. And I am just blown away by these Prospera varieties. So again, I grew the Italian large leaf and the red, but I think I'm going to try some additional ones next year. I think I'm going to try the Thai one because I really love Thai basil, and they are susceptible to a lot of the same problems that your standard Genovese basils are. But even if you don't normally have these problems with basil, you still may want to consider growing some of these Prospera varieties. For example, last July, I went to visit my brother in New Jersey, and typically New Jersey summers aren't persistently hot, humid, and wet enough to really beat up basil plants, but they had a really hot and wet June and July there, and his basil actually had downy mildew. So had he gone with these Prospera varieties, that would have likely never been a problem. You never know what kind of summer you're going to have. So getting these disease-resistant varieties, well, they are insurance whether you need them or not. Don't plan for the case where you're just going to assume everything is going to go normally and everything's going to go great. Assume that things are not going to go well. That way you have those extra bullets in the chamber, if you will. Having those natural resistances, it's just a game changer. And the best part is there's no compromise in flavor. These are exactly as delicious as any other varieties of similar basils that you've ever had. There is no difference. As for me, I am never going to grow any other varieties of basil ever again, unless an even more disease-resistant strain comes out later down the road. I don't see any reason to ever go back to the less disease-resistant varieties because what's the point? I don't care if these seeds are 50% more expensive, they are worth every penny because I have never seen such good results in all my life. So whether you have a challenging climate in your late summers to grow basil, or you just want a little bit more of an extra insurance policy to try and guarantee a good harvest to the best of your ability, please try these Prospera varieties. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring the notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. Again, for the seeds that I featured in this video, I placed direct links down to them down in the video description for your convenience. For everything else I use in real life in my yard and garden, like these pruning shears or any fertilizers, well, I placed direct links down in the video description to all of my most used items, and for everything else I use in totality, they are all linked in my Amazon storefront link. So expand the video description, click on the Amazon storefront link, and you'll see everything I use in real life. And while you're down there, please consider checking out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support my channel. I just released a whole bunch of homemade designs that you may be interested in. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. Okay, Daly, let's see what you got. Give him his whale. Wow. Great throw, Dale's mom. You did great. Here he comes. Dun, 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 dun. Give me that whale. Let's get it. Give me that whale. Oh, there he goes. Give me that whale. Give me that whale. Dale, are you about ready to eat? Dale ready for his hungries? Oh, you already ate? Yeah. Oh, okay. It's like, oh, double dinner. Oh, what a wonderful day. Let's go inside and eat twice.